Since the 90s, Sega, a company known for reporting Genesis games endlessly, has actually only re-released the Sonic Game Gear games a handful of times. The first I know about it is the Sonic Mega Collection Plus for the PS2, and then a few games did appear on the 3DS eShop store, RIP. But yeah, there hasn't really been a good way to legally play Game Gear games. Which is why I was really interested to hear that Sonic Origins, a year after it came out, was adding all of the Game Gear games as part of the Plus version. So I got my hands on it to see just how good are these Game Gear games. Are they as lovingly restored and presented as the Genesis games that have gotten so much love over the years? I got my copy of Sonic Origins Plus for the Nintendo Switch, which feels right. Game Gear games were for portable systems. The Nintendo Switch is the portable system out there right now. So let's check it out. Real fast, before we get into the Game Gear stuff, let's talk about the main Sonic Origins collection, because it's not as simple as it might seem. While Sega has been porting Sonic 1 through 3 on the Genesis and Mega Drive to every system under the sun for decades, all of these ports have been emulation to some degree. In Sonic Origins, all of the Genesis games have been rebuilt from the ground up for the first time using a modified version of the engine that powered the brilliant Sonic Mania games. This allows for super high quality widescreen pixel art that just looks incredible on modern panels and doesn't have any weird interlacing artifacts from the days of 60i CRTs. And the results, well, I mean, they look awesome. This is the definitive way to play Sonic 1, 2, and CD. Sonic 3 and Knuckles, on the other hand, well... Okay, in my opinion, the biggest sin, and I know a lot of people talked about this, is that the music for half of Sonic 3 is missing. And the alternative tracks that they dug up are so laughably bad that it almost single-handedly ruins the entire experience of the game. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, it sounds stupid, but music is critical to the blissful experience of these platformers. Just imagine if they got rid of aquatic ambience in Donkey Kong Country. It's just as mind-meltingly unpleasant here. I mean, okay, just listen to the difference real fast. Just check it out for yourself. I know there's all sorts of stuff with like Michael Jackson's involvement with these tracks, and there's some rights issues, but Sega's gotten the rights before, and I own ports of these games that have the correct music. So Sega, you did it before, do it again, get these tracks back. But we're not here to talk about Sonic 3 and Knuckles. We're here to talk about the Game Gear games, the Plus. So what have we got? Well, everything really. That includes Sonic, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic Chaos, Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic Drift 1 and 2, Tails Sky Patrol, Tails Adventure, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Beam Machine, Sonic Labyrinth, and even the Game Gear's terrible version of Sonic Spinball. And there's even like two-player versions of some of these games, so that's cool. And Sonic Drift 1 and Tails Sky Patrol, those have never been playable in the US. Those have always been Japanese-only games, so it's really awesome to see them here, even if they're, you know, a little rough around the edges in some ways. Nothing is free when it comes to Sonic Origins, and the Game Gear games arrive basically as DLC. Even if you buy the game cartridge, you still have to use a download code to get the Game Gear games, which sucks. Especially if you buy this game used and someone's already used the code. So, now that we know everything that's in the collection, let's give one of these games a try and see how it looks and plays. I mean, the Genesis ones look awesome, so surely these are going to be great as well. Alright, press start. Sure, I can do that. Oh, okay. Oh, so by the way, FYI, X is start. No, you can't really change this easily. Yeah, this is going to be a bit rough. So one thing should be obvious here. These Game Gear games have not been lovingly rebuilt in the retro engine like the Genesis games. These are simple ports using emulation with zero the quality of life features that emulation can bring. There's no screen modes to simulate Game Gear screens like on the Analog Pocket or RetroArch. In fact, the pixel aspect ratio is locked to 1:1 pixels, which looks squished and unpleasant because the Game Gear pixels weren't perfectly square. The Game Gear frame is a rectangle. Now I'm sure MVG or somebody could tell you exactly which emulator is being used behind the scenes, but from what I can tell, every aspect of this just feels kind of rough and rushed. The sound is crunchy and unpleasant in a way that I don't quite understand. I mean, playing emulators in Analog Pocket or even original hardware, some of these sounds don't sound nearly this bad. For some reason, some of the sound effects will play back fine on handheld mode and on the recorder, but when you actually play them through speakers, they don't play back right. There are also thick black bezels around the frame, which I honestly don't mind, because Game Gear games benefit from a screen size that's smaller and closer to the original. Sega adds bezels on bezels though, which is kind of a weird look if you don't have the black borders, but you can change this in the settings. However, you can't actually change the frame size, and you should have some choice on how the frame's being displayed, like the pixel aspect ratio I mentioned before. And I can tell that Sega is using integer scaling, which is great, but what's the point if, it doesn't look great? But whatever. Enough about how they look. They look good enough. Really, if you're not super picky, you can see what's going on. How do the games play? Overall, they're fine, with no obvious lag that wasn't actually already present in the games themselves. As mentioned before, the start button being assigned by default to the X button is super weird. The Game Gear only had 3 buttons outside the D-pad, 1, 2, and start. The Switch and other modern controllers have countless more buttons, including select, 4 shoulder buttons, and 2 additional face buttons. So why not use literally any of these for the game menu instead of the start button, one of the few buttons that actually carries over directly from the Game Gear? Over and over, I kept pressing start and pulling up a menu when the game tells me to press start. It's very frustrating. When it comes to completing Game Gear games, I often prefer using RetroArch over original hardware for 2 reasons: save states and a rewind function. Many old games, including all of these classics, didn't have batteries built in, so they either had no save function or relied upon complex password systems that are just a pain to use. In Sonic Origins Plus, you get 1 save state per game, which is kind of like the bare minimum. It would have been nice to have at least like 3 save states or some basic data to go with the save state, like a screenshot or a timestamp or literally anything. Some of these games like Tails Adventure do get pretty complicated, so multiple saves would be a huge help. But you know what? At the rate we're going, I should be thankful there's a save function at all. The rewind function is just missing. Nintendo gets a lot of well-deserved flack for how they handle their retro emulation sometimes, but even they offer a rewind function for their 8-bit and 16-bit games. Rewind is a godsend for exploring later levels without a huge time investment. I mean, and for that matter, it would be great to see like some sort of level select, but I'm asking for too much at that point. So one thing to think about is, what about the Master System? The Game Gear and the Master System share pretty much the same hardware. The Master System was Sega's 8-bit predecessor to the Mega Drive, and I never really saw any in the United States, but it sold really well in other parts in the world. So when the Game Gear was releasing new Sonic games, often many of them would come out on the Master System as well. And because the Master System was a home console, it filled up an entire standard definition screen, so it has a lot more pixels to work with than the Game Gear did. Because of this, the field of view in a lot of games is superior. You can see a lot more of what's going on. So like the Master System version of Sonic 2 is a lot better than the Game Gear version of Sonic 2. So because of this, I think it would have been a home run, a no-brainer for Sega to include the Master System of a lot of these games. Especially since this is a home console release. Like, a lot of people are going to be playing these on larger screens, so it would be great to use all the features of a larger screen, like actually see more. And also, Master System emulation is a bit rougher around the edges than Game Gear, and ROMs are often hard to come by. This could have been a huge feature for collectors and people who are interested in Master System versions of the games. So, Sega, an idea for Plus Plus? Maybe some extra DLC, please? One thing this review hasn't even touched on yet is the actual Game Gear games themselves. Are they any good to begin with? Are they worth playing at all? Well, even though I love the Game Gear and, I have this whole channel, I'm not gonna lie to you, these aren't wall-to-wall bangers. Some of these games are more historical curiosities rather than, things that are fun to play. But there are a few greats here, and if you're wondering where to start and you haven't watched any of my other videos, then I will say I recommend beginning with Sonic Triple Trouble and Sonic 1. From there, continue your studies with Sonic Chaos, Tails Adventure, and maybe throw Sonic Drift 2 in there if you're feeling adventurous. If you feel like throwing your controller into the TV, Sonic Labyrinth is there to drive you to the ragged edge of sanity. So after all of that, should you play Sonic Origins Plus? Let's be real, a lot of people don't want to mess with emulators, they don't want to try to download files from the internet, they just want something that works, and they want something to remember their old games by, and really, if you just want to have an afternoon playing some old Sonic games from the Game Gear, it's gonna do the job. There's a lot of things that I don't think have been really done to like the standard I would have liked to see. If you're the type of person who's watching videos like this, most likely you care a little bit more about your emulation quality than I think the target audience for this collection. So really, yeah, even your most basic free emulator is gonna do better than this. And believe me, if you're gonna try to finish Sonic 2 for Game Gear, you're gonna want a rewind function. But yeah, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff if you enjoy these videos, and I will see you in the next one.